Well, it's another big news day for the Las Vegas Raiders, and joining me to help talk it all through is Bill Bradley, a local sports content consultant. Bill, first off, can you go and introduce yourself for us?
I'm Bill Bradley. I'm the former sports editor at the Review-Journal here in town. Before that, I worked for the NFL media, and I've also been sports editor in Nashville and Sacramento. So I know the NFL pretty well. So
Very nice. Well, thanks for joining us. And as you could tell by the graphic behind us, the Raiders, they have a new GM. And of course, on Friday, they promoted Antonio Pierce to be a full-time head coach. They had 3 finalists for this GM position: the interim GM Champ Kelly, then Ed Dodds, the Colts assistant GM, and former Chargers GM Tom Telesco. They go with the guy with the experience, with the job. Why do you think the Raiders made this decision?
I think because, well, it's twofold. They've got to change the culture. They've got to bring in other thoughts, other means. When you look at they went so much the Patriots way for a couple years there, and I believe that this is a way to just change the culture, bring back some of the Raiders culture, and also bring in an experienced hand. And that's also the reason why they went Telesco. Antonio Pierce did a good job down the stretch, very good job down the stretch. However, they need somebody who is experienced in running the front office and putting together the roster. And I think Antonio is going to have a tough enough time coaching that team.
Yeah, there were drips of news throughout this process that Mark Davis was hesitant to pair a rookie head coach in Antonio Pierce with a rookie full-time GM with Champ Kelly. So you bring a guy with 11 years experience of being the GM of the Chargers.
Right.
You know, what kind of difference do you think that makes considering the coach you have in AP?
Well, if you look at the Raiders' recent history, you had the coach running the operations before with Gruden and then with Josh McDaniels. So there's no question. Ziegler did a good job. He drafted some pretty good players. However, he wasn't running. He didn't have the main call on that. It seemed to be Josh McDaniels' show, even though they might have said it was a joint decision. But I think that this is all the idea that the GM is going to be in charge now, not the coach.
I think a lot of Raider fans realized today, wait a minute, didn't the Raiders just get this guy fired, right, from that blowout win? But of course, if you look at the Chargers season, there were so many injuries. You had Easton Stick out there, so that was kind of an anomaly game.
And it's not just what he did with the Chargers, what he did with the Colts, too. He was there during the Bill Polian years with Peyton Manning and also when the drafting of Andrew Luck. But with the Chargers, Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert, all under his tutelage and his oversight with the Chargers.
Yeah, and you can't mention Tom Telesco over his tenure with the Chargers without bringing up Justin Herbert.
Yes.
That he nailed that with the first-round, 6th overall pick several years ago. Now he's one of the top franchise quarterbacks in the NFL. You look at the quarterback room for the Raiders, there's a lot of questions with Aiden O'Connell right now. Is Garoppolo going to be a part of the future? And even if he is, it might be as a backup. So how do you think maybe Telesco's ability to draft a quarterback, how do you think this plays into the decision?
I think you connect the dots from his history and the fact he's been with some high-octane quarterbacks, and I think he drafts a very good quarterback, I think first or second round. Let's say Penix falls to the Raiders. Maybe he goes there. Maybe there's a good one available in the second round. Obviously, the Raiders don't have a great draft. That's a middle round choice, but I think what happens is you'll see a quarterback be picked in the first or second round for the Raiders.
So a lot of Raider fans now wonder, okay, we got the head coach covered and the GM covered. Those are our first 2 bases, but we still have an offensive coordinator to go hire and maybe a DC if Patrick Graham does not return and he goes elsewhere. You know, how do you see this process going and what kind of timeline, how soon?
I think that's going to be a very high pick. I think, well, at one point, Cliff Kingsbury was mentioned as the offensive coordinator. I think that may be by the wayside, especially if with the Chicago Bears looking at him, if they can get a package deal with Caleb Williams and Cliff Kingsbury going to the Bears. I'm not sure where they go after that for an offensive coordinator, because there are a lot of good ones out there, but there's a lot of ones who really are coming from situations where, well, that there's some unproven ones out there.
No doubt. And going back to the GM, of course, Tom Telesco, 11 seasons in LA, being the GM of the Chargers. Now he finished with a record just shy of 500, but 3 playoff appearances and 8 Pro Bowlers that he produced over that span. What is his reputation, you think, in NFL circles?
I think the fact he's a smart drafter, he's a very good person in terms of managing a roster. I don't think they hold against him what happened with the under Staley. I think people look more at what they did with Phillip Rivers. I mean, they got to the playoffs a couple years under Phillip Rivers where they had no business getting into the playoffs. So, and that's what's so sad to see them drop off the cliff after that, especially when they have Herbert on the roster. But I would think people look at what he did in that transition from the Colts to the Chargers, how he built up the Chargers when he got there, because they had some people in the roster, but he kept the roster going in terms of quality. So I think people are going to say, this is a good move. I think overall people are going to say, this is a smart move by Mark Davis.
Sure, and of course, Champ Kelly might have been some Raider fans' pick to be the GM, considering he was a part of this season,
right.
And he's a known name in Las Vegas and amongst Raider Nation. And of course, he did possibly help the team revive the season that looked so lost there in October. But he still is a part of this franchise.
Right.
He's still under contract. Just give us some insight of how these things usually work. Do you think Champ Kelly is going to be a part of the future of this team?
I think they want to make him part of it. I think they want to help him learn. It's all part, and especially with the way the Rooney rules are, he's going to get some general manager interviews down the road. Mm-hmm. But I think they also say, look, you did a good job since we let go of Ziegler. However, you need to get some more seasoning, some more work under, and this is where Telesco can help you. So I think if he does himself a favor and stays with the organization, learns from Telesco, he's going to be much better a candidate for the next job where there is a real GM job available.
And given how poorly the McDaniels-Ziegler era went, I think
Very
there's so many Raider fans, anything's a breath of fresh air at
Yes,
this point.
yes.
It could have been Dodds, it could have been Champ Kelly, and I think a lot of people would be on board with it.
But I think it also says they just needed somebody new. Mark Davis needed a brand new GM from outside the organization. Mm-hmm. And this is a great, I think it's a great hire in that regard.
No doubt about it. And also, we'll finish with this. I know you have kind of a contrarian opinion on Antonio Pierce. I think that's a lot of the buzz with Raider Nation. And so much of it has been positive, and for good reason, finishing 5-4 in that stretch as interim head coach. But where do you stand on his hire?
I guess I flip-flop on the minute on his hire. I think he's good in the sense that he's a very much a motivational coach. He got the team lifted up and got a team that finished 8-9, actually playing for a 5-4 record in his time. However, he left an Arizona State program where he wasn't the coach, but he was the head of recruiting. He wasn't the head coach like Herm Edwards, but he was in charge of recruiting. And that organization, that team at school is now facing NCAA violations. In fact, the NCAA said Antonio Pierce was the ringleader for the issues they have at Arizona State. That was an actual report the NCAA put out. Well, it makes me take pause. It hasn't been brought up in the media that much this past stretch here to see who got hired. And I just think I wish it hadn't been pushed under the rug, but I think there is a factor there. You have to be aware. The fact is, he seems good on the surface, but there's a lot of scorched earth happening in Arizona after him.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think the players' opinions definitely played a key factor, especially when you have Max Crosby possibly threatening to be traded. There are so many things going on behind the scenes there. But, Bill, we appreciate your time because it's a new era here.
Who knows what happens next, right?
Yeah.
It's all the Raiders. So,
any predictions on how this season's going to go, how this offseason might unfold?
I think you're going to see a heavy emphasis on offense in the draft. You're also going to see a heavy emphasis on what I see next season is really a rebuild. You're going to see maybe a 4-13 team before it gets better. You have to tear things down before you can get better in the NFL.
In many cases in the NFL, whenever you hire a GM and a head coach, it's the GM that's the first domino to fall and then the head coach to follow so that GM can have some kind of factor in that decision. But instead, the Raiders did it opposite. Why do you think they did that?
I think a couple reasons. I think there was some urgency because of the pool of candidates out there, or some big new name candidates out there for head coach. So they had to get their head coach taken care of first. They had to find out if, and maybe they did, and we don't know about it, but they had to find out, I think, if Harbaugh was interested at all. Then they also maybe they already had an idea pretty much after the interviews who they wanted for general manager, and it might have been a case where maybe Telesco had already said, "Hey, I'm fine with him if you pick me." So I'm sure those questions were asked in the interview process.
Absolutely. Well, either way, it's a new era for Las Vegas Raiders football, and we'll just have to see how this plays out. But Bill, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.